This is a Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dustin. Today we are here with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He is an organizational psychologist and best-selling author of Willpower Doesn't Work. His blogs have been read by over 100 million people and are featured on Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, Cheddar, Big Think, and many others. He is a regular contributor to INC and Psychology Today, and from 2015 to 2018, he was the number one writer in the world on medium.com. And he's currently waiting for a book to be, or you just published one, you're just waiting for it to come out, called Personality Isn't Permanent, which debunks the pervasive myths of personality that have captured pop culture. Is that correct?
Sounds right to me, man.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your newest book, and Personality is Permanent. That's interesting because I can totally relate. I have personal experience with it.
I know. I've read a little bit about your story. Sounds like there's a lot there. So this book's about, this book's about how most people have been taught kind of inaccurate views of personality, and these views can really limit people's ability to change and grow. The kind of dominant views are that your personality is who you are. It's innate. It's not flexible. You can't change it. And your job is just to discover who you are, figure out who you are so that then you can live the life that you were supposed to live. And those views lead people to being very inflexible and ultimately having a fixed mindset about themselves. Personality tests like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, these kind of tests actually kind of further solidify this idea that you are who you are. You get a label, and then your job is to kind of just live that label and confirm that label. And so it can really stop you from growing and changing. And this book's about how that view is actually inaccurate. It's not even good in the psychology. There's a lot of science about how your personality can and does change. Just as an example, Sean, you're probably not the same person you were 10 years ago, right?
Not at all. Not even the same person I was 6 months ago.
Exactly. And if you're someone who's growing and seeking growth, you're not going to be the same person. You're not going to have the same preferences and attitudes and habits. And so there's a lot of new research now on what's called your future self, and about defining a future version of yourself, and about how that's actually the only way to make decent, high quality decisions here and now, and about how you can and should change. You're actually going to be different. Your future self, Sean, is not going to be the same person you are today. They're going to have a different situation, different preferences. And so rather than holding so tight to your current identity, you can be flexible to who you want to be.
I agree with that 100%. I've lived that myself. Just through certain situations that I've been through, prison, whatever you want to call it. But that all helps to shape your personality. Your experiences shape your personality.
Definitely.
So the personality I had before I went to prison, I was like a social butterfly. You know what I mean? I was active, social, I wouldn't be afraid to talk to anybody. I would approach any woman, I was just, my nickname was Mr. After Hours, because I had, everybody would always come to my house after the clubs would close and we would party more. So, I was a pretty open, fun, jovial dude. When I went to prison though, it changed my personality quite a bit. Because
in what ways?
Because you can kind of be yourself, but you can't really be yourself because you're constantly guarded. You know what I mean? You're constantly, is somebody trying to angle something out of me? Because there's a lot of people in there that don't have anything. And if you have people supporting you on the outside, you have food and extra food and, snacks and all that other stuff, some people can kind of get envious. So you're always watching yourself, you don't want to, at any moment, sometimes, it may seem peaceful on the surface, but you don't know what kind of under stuff is going on. And, at any moment it could bust out into a fight in a unit where it turns into, a bunch of people get involved. So, you're always on edge. And so, and also too, when I got busted, it was because somebody snitched on me or ratted me out and set me up. And so now my trust of people started going away. So now you've got me, this guy who is, nice, partying all the time, shares his drugs, this and that. And then I go into a situation where I have to be completely guarded and I don't trust anybody. And I'm coming in because somebody set me up. So immediately I'm just like, I shut everybody out. And,
when you walked out of prison though, how were you different?
same way.
Would you say you're still that way now? Is it you're less trusting of other people nowadays?
I'm more, yeah, probably.
You think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, it definitely keeps the people that you don't want in your circle out of your circle because you already know what the signs are. You know what the red flags are. So the great thing about age is experience and experiencing a wide range of different things. So when you kind of hit your 40s, you've experienced a lot of stuff. Your 20s, you're kind of still stupid. You're just getting your feet wet and being an adult and, finding out what you like, what you don't like, getting your heart broke, making mistakes, going to jail, all these other things. By the time you hit your 40s, you know what I mean? You've got a good chest of tools, so to say, you know what I mean, that you've built up, and you're able to identify some of these things that, I know what that is. Get out, go. I'm, done with you, or, any other situations that pop up. So, I mean, to question things more. Don't always take things for face value because things are never usually what they seem.
Good. That's good. There is one negative drawback to that is that often as people age, they stop, their assumptions become so solidified, right? That they stop being surprised, stop having those assumptions upgraded even again and again, right? And so often, because there's a lot of learning that happens through your 20s, even before. We have two 15-month-old twins, and we're currently they're 15 months old. They can barely walk, and we're having them go through swimming lessons because we live here in Florida. And they're not loving it. Think about it. We're dropping it, we're not the ones doing it. They're swimming instructors, but they get dropped in the pool and are having to learn how to swim. That's not very fun for them, right? But it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And as you get older and older, because you can kind of dictate your own life, your comfort zone kind of overly controls you, right? And you stop. I mean, I think what you've talked about is the development of wisdom, which is really good. A challenge, though, can be once you get into a certain stage, you stop staying the student, and you stop putting yourself in those situations where you don't know all the answers, right?
Yeah, I think what helps with that, though, is, I mean, just what you're talking about is children, right? Or what you just mentioned. And I have a 3-month-old, almost 3 months old. And I was thinking about this earlier, too, that we see things before we have children, we see things from our side of it. You know what I mean? How we perceived it as a child. And when you're watching a child develop and grow up, you see it from the other side. So you see how they mimic you rather quickly. You know what I mean? So if you say a bad word, I'll do something and say, "Oh shit." And then not, but that much longer, "Oh shit." My kid's saying it. And so it's crazy to watch it from the other side now as an adult with a child, watching how formidable they are. And that in itself has made me, I don't know if went off the topic or not, but
no, dude, we're just having a conversation. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why they say that environment's one of the biggest predictors of personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to be like those you're around, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, kids pick up on what they see growing up. Anything that they see, you know what I mean? They like to mimic things. They're curious. And curiosity, I think, is what keeps people engaged. You know what I mean? And when you have a lack of curiosity, you withdraw. It's just you don't, I don't need to know anything, but there's so many things out there to know. So if I continue to have that curiosity to want to know the next thing, or what is this like, or what is that like, I think that kind of helps to keep me grounded and in a healthy space.
I think it's difficult to be curious though if you don't have anything you're aspiring towards. I think kids they're seeking growth. They're wanting to learn because there's so much that they need to know and want to know. I think when people become adults and if they stop setting goals or if they stop wanting to be someone, then there's nothing to be curious about.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, you do make a good point, because my curiosity usually comes from this podcast. I get a lot of exposure to different people, socialization. I mean, technology is amazing, especially now. Should have bought some stock in Zoom. Uh,
Seriously.
yeah,
A couple of years ago, that would have been huge.
yeah, and especially now. I mean, everybody's on it. I mean, they're probably having to update their servers so they can handle the bandwidth now. So yeah, it also, so you have another, not to veer off, but you had another interesting part of your story. So you adopted three children, and then because you thought that your wife wasn't able to have kids, and then all of a sudden she's pregnant with twins. So now you got five in your tribe.
Yep. We got five. Yeah, and we didn't necessarily do it because we didn't think she could have kids.
No.
She actually had grown up with foster kids and she wanted to do that.
Oh,
She
okay.
wanted to do foster care. And so, while we were living in South Carolina, we became foster parents of three kids. And that to me felt like jumping in the pool, as our little girls, like go from 0 to 3 kids and these kids have crazy emotional challenges. So yeah, it was nuts, and then obviously we were able to adopt them, and a month later my wife had twins. And so kind of can throw a loop at you. In 2018, we adopted 3 kids and had twins. It was a crazy year, man.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a huge change in a short period of time.
It's a lot of change, and I think it's good. It was good for me. I'll just admit, one of the big things I talk about in personalities and permanent is obviously that your current self is different from your former self. You're not the same person you used to be, right?
Yeah.
But your future self is different from your current self. But, the person I am today, the person having this conversation with you, now that I've got 5 kids and we've gone through all those court battles, and, I've learned how to, seek to be a better husband and father. I'm not the same guy I was 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, when we first got these kids, admittedly, it took an adjustment for me to want them. Like when, it was mostly my wife's not decision, because it was our shared decision. It was mostly her desire initially. Yeah. And I had to learn how to develop that desire. And that's something you can do, by the way. If you desire something, just because you want it now doesn't mean you're always going to want it. And you can actually train that desire out of yourself. But you got to invest yourself in a new goal or pursuit. And so, I mean, for a long time, I didn't know if I wouldn't say I didn't want the kids, but I wasn't as invested. And so I learned to invest myself because I wanted to become that person. I wanted to be a better husband, father. And so I now love these kids like crazy. And I would say I always loved them, but I didn't love them like I should have, And so you can train you can definitely change yourself. You can choose to become someone different. And then you can get to a point where the person you are today is very different, who wants different things and who prioritizes different things than what you used to prioritize.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like someone said, well, I just learned to love them. You know what I mean? That saying, learn how to love somebody. Or
yeah, but think about you. You prioritize different things than you prioritized back in the day.
Oh, definitely. And for me, a lot of it had to do with risk versus reward. For a lot of the risks that I was taking, I mean, what was I risking? I didn't have anything. You know what I mean? My life, it was, I hadn't accumulated anything. I didn't have a job. I was a drug dealer. You know what I mean? Barely break even. Just made enough money to keep the ship going, and partying like the way that I wanted to. But I mean, it wasn't, definitely not that. And so, yeah, there was hardly any risk for me. So I did it. Now it's when I think about doing stuff like that, I'm like, all right, well, it's a no-brainer now. Like, I have so much to lose that doing this one silly thing could crumble the whole cake. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's
pretty interesting, right? And your future self's going to have a different cake, right? And so your future self is going to do things differently than you do them now.
Yeah, I've heard that saying before. Like you're cashing checks today that your future self won't be able, or you're writing checks today that your future self won't be able to cash.
So how does that, like, what are some applications of that? Because I freaking love that idea and it kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
Give me some like examples of things like that aside from financial.
Um.
Because I love that idea and it scares me a little bit.
Yeah. So let's say I write a check. A lot of it has to do with feelings because like how I'm feeling determines that some of the decisions that I make or choices that are presented to me are a lot based on where I'm at emotionally. You know, have I had enough sleep? Have I had, you know what I mean? Have I had enough water? Because if, you know, if you're somewhat dehydrated, that plays, you know, a part in your brain too, your brain function. And at least that's how what I think. Um,
I think it's huge. And I think that that's actually very true. I think that we're making decisions right now, often that our future self is going to be pretty upset about, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's why there's a lot of research on this now in psychology that you're actually going to make better decisions rather than saying, what do I want? It's what would my future self want me to do?
yeah.
Then you can make decisions that would set them up for success versus doing decisions now that are going to set them up for failure.
Well, it also gives you that pause because we make split decisions, especially in like, you know, anger. Anger is a huge one. It's the cheapest emotion and the one that's the most readily available, but it's the one that causes the most damage in such a short amount of time. You know what I mean? And that pause, wait a minute, what would my future self do? It takes it away. And
It's
you,
called living intentionally
yeah. And it takes that
rather than
emotion.
subconsciously and emotionally, right?
Yeah, and so what I do is I just put all of that stuff into perspective into the decisions that I need to do. So I mean, obviously for me, I'm you know my drug of choice was methamphetamine. That's what took me down, and so by all means, I have to do whatever it takes to not put myself in a situation where I may have to choose. You know what I mean? Do I want to do
So,
this drug or do I want to ruin my life? And
well,
so
so here's a question for you. Yeah, I want you to explain this a little bit because I have a younger brother who's struggling with this right now. So break this down a little bit further for me.
okay, so what I do is I know what my triggers are, and it was only and you don't know this until you actually get time and distance away from the substance itself and get some sobriety under your belt. And with that drug,
But how did you get that time and distance? You had to get that time and distance in order to even get there.
it took me 15 years to get
I know,
that.
but how'd you get that time and distance? Was that prison or what was it that allowed you to get sober even for a month?
It was it was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was tired of not being someone that could be counted on, always disappointing everybody, never following through with anything, can't get a job, can't do this, was just constantly screwing up. You know what I mean? And I was just got tired of it. And I was thinking about, God, you know, you're 30, you're in your 30s now. I mean, half your life is over and you don't amount it, you don't amount to anything. You know, you're living at home. You know what I mean? Just the person that I became, I didn't like who it was. And, you know, I'd been through 18 different institutions, you know, from juvenile halls to what are the drug treatment centers? You know what I mean? There was just a long wake of destruction that was in my path and everything I touched just, you know what I mean? Just wasn't a good person. And so all of those things kind of combined, I just sort of, you know, I try to explain it. It's almost like I was possessed for 15 years by some unsettled spirit. You know what I mean? And it was just going through chaos and madness and all kinds of different situations and things that I was, you know, on a path for. And then all of a sudden it just, the light went on and it changed. Uh, but the one thing that gave me the good start is And I don't know if this would work for anybody, but I had known what prison was like. I knew that I was going back to a violation to do 90 days in a county facility. In a county facility, it's not like prison. It's a lot more dangerous. You just got people in there that don't have any respect. A lot of fights. Anything could possibly happen in a county or city jail situation. So I knew I was going into this, and I had a month to turn myself in, or like 2 months to turn myself in. And I knew that if I was going to be kicking while I was in there, then I would be vulnerable to the forces that were inside. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be my optimal self to be able to defend myself if I'm in there trying to kick a meth habit. And also nicotine too. So I stopped smoking about 30 days, maybe like 6 weeks to 30 days before I went in, and I stopped meth to do that too as well. And then once I got out, I just maintained it. And what allowed me to maintain that was I found different hobbies to do that didn't require being around the same people that I was around. You know what I mean? So I had to remove myself from everything that had to do with that lifestyle, including listening to music, because it was triggering for me. Like I would be listening to a song, and it would remind me of a time when I'm driving down the highway, you know what I mean? Listening to that song in the summer, or, cause all the experiences weren't bad. It's just the outcomes of some of them were really bad, but I had a lot of good times too. And so it's those good times that the triggers remind you of that make you think that it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I wrote a book once called Willpower Doesn't Work. And it really is hitting on all the topics you're describing, that you've got to remove yourself from all of the things that trigger you, and even the people, the places, the triggers. You got to create a new environment around your future self, or else, if you stay in those situations with those influences, no amount of willpower is going to get you out.
Yeah, because the brain will figure out a way to get what it wants, and it will talk you into or rationalize irrational behavior. You know what I mean? And because you're thinking about something. And here's a part of meth that people don't talk about, and it's the sexual aspect of it. All right. And a lot of times that brought me back. I would not be doing it, but I would think about the kind of sex that you have on it, and how good it is, and everything else, and it would bring me right back to it. Now I'm back in the cycle again. And so, a lot of people don't even talk about that part of it, but anything sex.
I have people in my life that are hooked on meth right now. And so, I'm not really sure how to handle the situation, because they go through crazy cycles. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a good drug. And it really, it affected, like I said, it took me 2 years to get normal after I stopped, which was normal up here, where the serotonin levels and everything else kind of evened out. And I felt like I wasn't in a fog, kind of, you know what I mean? Where just life was just different for a couple of years after that. And it wasn't.
What were those 2 years like? Like, how did you make it through those 2 years?
Well, part of it was, I had other things that so like I got involved in playing slow pitch softball. So I found different things to give me sense of purpose, and to also I was doing things that were building my self-esteem and my confidence. Okay. And so when I was using, I was doing a lot of things that were bad decisions and made me feel bad about myself, which would therefore put me into a spin or a justified way to just keep using, because I felt bad, like, oh, I'm a piece of shit anyway, so who cares? Who cares if I go and get high? It doesn't matter. And I would purposely set up situations to put me in that mode.
To fail, right? So that you would feel like crap again, right?
Yeah. And so I had to find other things that made me feel good about myself. And so, being a part of a team, being accountable, for this team, showing up, playing, and I just got really involved in it. Like I'm the kind of guy that has the, I go, I go hard or I don't go at all. You know what I mean? When I get into something, like I'm into it. Like I have every single, thing that could possibly be a part of it. I know I can tell you everything about it. I just, I go all in on it. And so I did with that. And, the thing that I didn't like how that league was being run. And so I'm like, all right, well, you know what? I'm just going to start my own league then. And so I started my own softball league in my city. And that was the first time that I had actually accomplished something that wasn't illegal or, part of me trying to manipulate somebody out of something, or, you know what I mean? It's something I actually took an interest in and sought out something, completed it, and accomplished a goal. And so
That's essential for confidence, right?
yeah, and for self-esteem, because now it's like, oh, maybe I'm not a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm not this convicted felon that's never going to amount to anything. And so you have to start doing things that are going to change the story inside your own head. You know what I mean? And that's the key. It's changing, because people can tell you anything they want, but experience is going to give you that confidence and that self-esteem. And then you have to change that narrative inside your head on your own. And that's the beginning of it. And then once I started, I accomplished that, and then there was other things, and then bigger things, and then bigger things. And then, here I have a podcast now. I've had it for a year. I'm making good money. Not anymore. I mean, because of the situation.
COVID-19.
Yeah, the situation.
Yeah, but you're going to get out of this. You're going to keep moving forward. You're not destroyed. So I'm going to actually request that we publish this whenever is as soon as possible for you, because I want to share this with someone. But what's interesting is in this book, personality isn't permanent. One of the big aspects of personality is obviously the story in your head. Like literally, that's one of the biggest drivers. Actually, one of the chapters in this book is called "Shift Your Story," and from like a identity perspective, how we see ourselves is based on how we explain ourselves. And so I wonder if with you, for example, when you started, I mean, obviously you were getting experience and you were starting to see yourself as someone worth being, but now when you're working towards goals and stuff like that, like, how do you use this story to help you become who you want to be now?
Oh, that's a tough one, because I'm in the middle of some struggles myself currently, and time management, being efficient with my time, following through with, when this podcast first started, I took 2 months off. I went again, and I went, a little bit more, like another month. I had some time to do it, so I busted out a few, and then I took another 3 months off. And so, like, I know that if you want to have a successful podcast or a successful social media, anything, consistency is what's going to drive your message and your brand and your market and everything else. And I know all these things. It's just a matter of me trying to put it all together. And one of the biggest challenges that I have is that I look way far ahead instead of just starting. You know what I mean? Like I could write a book. I've got a million stories. You know what I mean? It's just like, it just seems like for me, it seems like such a far, far away thing. And it plays into my own laziness, because if I think that way, then that just gives me the permission to go, oh, that's too hard. And I can just continue being lazy.
What would happen if not finish the book, but like, what could you accomplish in 90 days towards that book? Where could you be in 90 days from now if you were working on it for 90 days? Even if you just wrote, not consistently, but if you
halfway done.
Yes, that would be an interesting story. You know what I mean? Is you could be in a crazy place in 90 days from now, right? I think that becomes the new focus, right?
Yeah. And then, but there's other things that I've got going on too. So it's a matter of me stopping the excuses that I have in my head that give me the permission to not fulfill what I know would elevate me to the next level of what it is that I'm trying to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude, we're all there. We're all dealing with it.
And I think some of that could be fear of, okay, what if it does do what I want it to do? You know what I mean? And so there's that as well. It's like right now I'm like,
Well, what is the negatives? What are any negatives that would come if it works?
um knowing my personality is, will I be able to uh handle it? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, what if the person in the future is someone who can handle it?
Well, then it's a win. It's a net positive. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of changing that narrative in myself.
It's freaking cool, man. I hope you write that book.
I do too, man. I hope I get out of my own way and stop being lazy and figure out how to
Yeah, I think
manage.
your book would be really important for a lot of people. I think you've got a lot of really important insights and you've got crazy stories and a crazy past. And I think you've come such a far way that it'd be sad if your book didn't make it out there.
I agree. I agree. I guess I just have to do it, man. I just have to do it.
Do the worst first, dude. Do it in the morning before you do anything else, man. Do it for 30 minutes a day.
You know what? A lot of times when people tell me stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. And it never really, it kind of just got, I already knew that it was going to fly out the other ear as soon as it went in. You ever experience that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, but I think you're right, man. I think maybe I mean, at least owe it to myself to try, right?
Well, one thing from like a willpower perspective, think about it. Like who could you get to support you on this goal? Why you got to do it by yourself, man? Who can you get? I mean, you're now talking about it. That's a big thing. You know, your audience now is going to hear about it. We all want it, you know. You got to tell your audience it's coming out, man. Put that positive pressure on yourself. Tell them it's coming out in 6 months, man. Tell them start, or even a year or whatever, but start getting some accountability externally outside yourself. You know what I mean? And maybe get some support. Someone who promises they'll read your crappy chapter at the end of the week, you know,
Yeah.
and give you some feedback. You know, you got to stop trying to do it all on your own and start getting an environment around it, just like you did with your drugs.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, that's how you create a future self. It's the same process, in my opinion, as overcoming an addiction, dude. Right now, you have an addiction to not writing. You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, the process of becoming your future self is the same way. You got to build an environment around it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I mean, if you just look at the way that I look, I live in a fifth wheel. All right. So it's a 40-foot fifth wheel, just me. I'm pretty, being in jail has made this actually not bad for me. You know what I mean? I've been in solitary confinement for 30 days plus. I mean, it's a lot worse than this. So it's just I've become to the point where like I have acquaintances, you know what I mean? I have one good friend that I can count on, and if I ever got in trouble, I could count on him. But for the most part, I don't go out and try to make new friends, or you know what I mean.
Would you be willing to start doing that, man? Going outside your comfort zone?
Well, I feel like I am on these because I mean it's really easy for me to do this. You know what I mean?
Dude, you're freaking good at it.
Yeah, this is simple for me, but like to go out, you know what I mean, in society, like let's just say I'm single. Like I wouldn't even think about wanting to go and approach a chick to go ask her out or something because it just
Wait, so you wouldn't think about it, but would you want to eventually?
yeah, at some point. I mean, I think that's it's a lot better the option than the online dating because you never really know what you're getting because everybody's putting their best picture of themselves from 10 years ago on there or something a lot of times.
I mean, how I view personalities is it's your comfort zone,
Yeah.
right? And so it would be courageous to work towards a future self, the version of you who's got a wife or a kid, or maybe it's not even that, just in a great relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it takes courage to stop being in your comfort zone, but that's how you create results in your life, right?
Yeah. And then also too, I mean, a lot of it is that like I said, I have I co-parent my daughter, and so she's almost 3. And so I make sure that I'm, you know what I mean? Any opportunity I get, I'm around her. because these are the years that, you know what I mean, that she needs to know that I'm there and, you know, I'm a part of her life. And, you know, even though me and her mom aren't together, it was for reasons because of a lot of it was to do with me and some of my anger issues and how I responded to things. And, you know, what I grew up with watching as a kid, you know what I mean? And so I knew that I had to break that cycle because I didn't want her growing up thinking that this is the norm. And so if she ever got into a situation like that, as an adult or a young woman, that, she would know better that no, this isn't the way things are supposed to be. I got to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was more of, uh, trying to save her for her future self. You know what I mean? By not having to witness this toxic and abusive relationship unfolding in front of her. And she was getting to a point where she was understanding what was going on. You know what I mean? They're smart. They pick up on things quick. So,
Yeah, dude, they do.
and so, yeah, that's why I do, you know, and I'm pretty, sorry about that. Pretty, vigilant about making sure that I'm there and present and a part of her life.
Yeah, and you can do that while still achieving goals. I mean, I think your podcast is big. You know,
Yeah.
I love that you're protecting that, though. I love that you're protecting that. That is the biggest thing in your life. And you don't want to, you know. So I understand.
Yeah. So I put a lot of time and energy into that, and then whatever I have left over, you know, it either goes into work, or now I was able to put a pretty big dent in what I'm doing as far as content. You know what I mean, and what I'm releasing. And it seems to be getting
awesome.
Yeah, it seems to be getting better in my interview style and the way that I'm like. If you listen to the first one and then to me now, there's a huge difference.
I love that about moving forward. I mean, when I read my old blog posts, dude, the old version of me, I'm like, whoa, I've come quite a ways.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, man. To be able to, and I like shows like that. Honestly, I like podcasts where it's not professional people that are personalities. You know what I mean? That are used to doing this. It's people that are trying something and stepping outside of their comfort zone, usually for the first
Definitely.
time. You know what I mean? For the first time, and have no idea how to really do this. And the ones that stick with it, because a lot of them start and people don't really realize what they're getting into, because it is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, you know, social media, marketing, building an audience, all of that is not the easiest thing in the world. But you know, if you stick to it and you stay consistent, here we go again, time and consistency, you know, you will finally probably end up where you want to be. And, yeah, and it's cool to be able to follow shows like that to where you actually grow. You're growing as the host is growing as well.
I love that.
So, any other questions for you? I think we pretty much covered a lot of this stuff. I mean, even in your potential interview questions that I can ask you.
I think we're good, man. We can. Yeah. I mean, we don't need to go over any more questions unless there's anything you want to. Otherwise, I mean, if there's anything else you want to ask that seems interesting or relevant to you, we can. Otherwise, I think we've covered a lot, man.
Yeah, we definitely. This is a good conversation. You got me to think about some things, which is good. I mean, that's why I do this a lot of the time. You know, it's not only because I want to give my audience good content, but it's also it helps me as well. You know, because there's certain things that I still struggle with, and you know, we're all just you know, trying to be better people than we were yesterday. So. And
awesome, dude. I've loved this conversation. I'm going to request you publish this as soon as you can, and so I can share it with some important people in my life. But yeah, thank you for letting me be on your show. Thanks for chatting about Personalized and Permanent. I'll just say that anyone who is interested in the book, it can be available pretty much wherever books are sold. You know, Personalities and Permanent. My website's benjaminhardy.com. That's where I blog, and there's free resources there. So thanks for having me on your show, dude.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And what I'll do is I'll take your, you know, the information that I have from you, and I'll put that in my show notes, as well as to, I think you had a publicist, contacting me. So I'll get all of your links and everything from her, and that'll appear in the show notes as well.
It's amazing, dude. Well, I really loved your show. I love the concept of nowhere but up. I think that that's a really important message, and admire you, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, and continue to do the same work that you're doing. You're making a difference as well.
All right, man. Well, have a good one.
All right, you too.